Greetings and welcome to my channel. This is Sorcerer Tal. You can also find me online at sorcerersguild.com as well as on Facebook at the Sorcerers Guild. Today on Magical Theory and Unorthodox Weirdery, we are going to be talking about witches. Okay, now because this word is actually a very sensitive topic in certain aspects of our community, I do want to say that nothing I say on the Unorthodox Weirdery playlist should be taken as official guild policy or position on any matter. That being said, what is a witch? Okay, so this word has had many different definitions throughout time, and the concept behind that word has had many different words attached to it throughout time, both positive and negative. But in the modern era, if someone is to tell you that they are a witch, they are most likely a practitioner of some form of European paganism. Often this will be Wicca, some New Age version of paganism, but there's also the Strega from Italy that will sometimes refer to themselves as witches, as well as different versions of paganism coming from the British Isles, or the cunning folk from Wales, which is on the Isles, or Ireland, Scotland, in those areas, or up in Finland and Iceland. They have ideas that were attached to these concepts. And some of these people might, to this day, call themselves witches. Okay, so there's also the modern concept of a witch in the folklore. Yes, and this is, well, it takes on different personas depending on what movies are popular at the time, right? At the moment, Hocus Pocus 2 just came out, so we're back to the idea that witches eat children, witches wear pointy hats, and I suppose, right, you've seen my past videos on that. There are reasons to wear a pointy hat, or a top hat, or really any hat that you choose to make your hat. There are reasons for the hats. But that is beyond what these people are talking about with these movies. Like I said, we're back to the idea that witches eat children, that we're immortal, that, well, there wasn't any black cat familiars in that one, at least. But of course, then we've got the idea, the more persistent folklore of the green skin and the warts and the flying umbrooms. And some of these ideas, many of these can be traced back to some form of paganistic ritual at some point. But hidden within that is this idea, right? The witches worship the devil. That witches eat children, like we just mentioned. That witches do purposely curse crops, cause milk to spill. There have been all these negative connotations, and really, in the past, the word witch itself is not something that people called themselves. It was a word used to persecute. It was a word used to drive out. A word used to burn. A word used to find its uses to burn those who were other. Yeah? And yes, the church used this as a word to help drive out paganism, and they burnt the high priests and high priestesses within many of these churches with not only this word, but werewolf as well. Yeah? That's the one that we forget about now. Is that there were many people being burnt at the stake for being werewolves, just as there were of witches. But what is it they were looking for? These people that hate witches, that want to kill the witches, that want to burn the witches. Well, witch was only one word of what they were looking for as well. Because it isn't just in the British Isles that people burnt witches, or Europe that people burnt or killed witches. And what were they looking for? Was it people that practiced New Age Wicca? I don't think that's the case. So what do these witches have in common? And the other thing, children, with this word? Because that's it, right? They talk about the witch's mark. And yes, that was used as an excuse to burn women that they didn't like. But there was something more to that. There was something more there. There is something to the children that are born different. Yeah. There are those that were, in the European tradition, we'll stick with there at the moment. There are the idea of those that were born with extra bones in parts of Hungary and Romania. But anyways, I'm skipping ahead of myself. We're going to be talking about the negative aspects. This didn't just happen in Europe, yeah? We know about tribes in Africa that would kill their twins for fear that they were witches. Children born with extra fingers, extra limbs. Well, you've seen the name of this video, yeah? Those that others would call freaks. And there was a fear that those people born different, those born strange, would be witches. Would have witches inside of them. So what is a witch? In this term, a witch is someone who was born knowing magic. A witch is someone who isn't just their body. And sometimes, when an older soul is born into a newer body, the body will have a reaction to this extra information that is entered into their body, and they will be born with extra parts, extra things. In my case, I was born with 2 placentas, and a very classic witch's mark on the nipple that bled until I was about, I believe I was 7 years old when it finally stopped bleeding. I don't know if you can see it in the camera there. I have a scar here from it still. Right here. That actually bled until I was about 7 and was bright red for a very long time. For a lot of my life I was very embarrassed by my chest for that reason. But I see it for what it is now. Yeah, it's my witch's mark. But there was also the 2 placentas. But anyways, the point here is that is what these people were looking for. Because man tends to fear that which it does not understand. And these witches are something that is not understood easily. And they are often challenges to the authority within a group. Because we are the neurodivergent. We are the ones who think differently. And sometimes it affects not just our behavior and our minds, but our bodies, and that's the tip-off. Yeah? But there's more to it than just that. Because like I said, we are those that are more than just our body. But all of us are. We are those that are aware of it and create cohesion from one life into the next. Those who remember from one life to the next and carry that forward. And in the very distant past, this wasn't seen as a bad thing. This wasn't seen as wrong until man began to fear. We have traditions in the Neolithic era and even in more recent times where children born with extra fingers, with extra bones, just like I said, as we'll get to in a moment, that weren't reviled and feared, but rather given their position. And this is where the actual term of shamans come from. They were those that were born different. Those are born between 2 worlds, as my father would have said, or would say, or my great-grandfather. Those who are born between 2 worlds. And there are marks when someone is born between 2 worlds. It affects the birthing process often. But some of us have gone better at hiding that. Yeah, because as I said, there are many cultures that have wanted to eliminate that and have done things, some with the intent of destroying our memories. That is the real purpose of burning an actual witch at the stake, is the trauma. Because often, many of you that remember past lives, that remember your past lives, will find that one of the first things we remember is our death. So the more traumatic and terrifying our deaths can be, the more likely we are to block it out. And so, there are those of you that are getting frustrated with me right at this moment, and you're exactly who I'm talking to. I was there. I hated the idea of reincarnation. But I had all this stuff that didn't fit, yeah? And I was very persistent on that until I started having memories I couldn't deny. Yeah? I mean, this is not official guild policy or position on any matter. You don't have to believe what I'm saying to be a member of the guild, continue viewing my channel, use anything else in here. But, and I'm not saying that witches are the only ones that can perform magic. In fact, really, to become a witch, all you need to do is within this life, create the self-cohesion that will allow you to retain your identity from one life into the next. And once you start doing that, you are one of the people I am talking about. You are one of us. Okay, so where do we go from here? That's why I used the word freak earlier in the video. I'm sorry. Skipping ahead again. I have a lot to say on this. So, let's not skip it. Let's not skip ahead. Let's stay on track. Okay, so we were still talking about the negative... Yes, we were still talking about the negative aspects of it, how people have treated, and the actual word witch. And originally, that's what the word witch was for. It was a purgatory term. It was a pejorative. Sorry, I have a hard time with that word sometimes. It was a pejorative term used to hunt out those that had this ability, these powers, so that we could be removed from the culture, because there used to be those that would listen to us within certain societies. Within the Neolithic era, this was the most common form of religion, was they would follow the high-functioning neurodivergence, essentially. And this is where we began developing our cohesion, because we were those that thought differently and saw aspects that others did not. And that's where this began. But it eventually collapsed because, well, power corrupts, yeah? And it's easy to fake these types of things in many ways, so not everyone that tells you they are a witch is a witch. In fact, well, we won't get into that, but just because someone's saying they are a witch, in my opinion, does not necessarily mean they are or are not a witch by this definition of what it is that I'm trying to reclaim. Because we need to get back to ourselves. And we need to begin growing again. We need to form our community. Well, we can call ourselves witches if you like. We can call ourselves freaks. Most of the people I have known in this life that have known what I am talking about have called themselves freaks. That's just the term we have chosen to use. But there have always been those throughout history that want to, that perhaps maybe some of them have remembered at this point as well, that want to keep us under wraps, want to prevent the old way of being from returning. So, let's get into that. The positive aspects of this. Let's get into that a little bit more. The most recent within memory of this comes actually from the Hungarian area with the Taltos. And the Taltos were very specifically those born with extra bones. And this was a Magyar tradition coming out of the area that is now Hungary. And they watched for these children. And anytime a child was born with an extra finger, placentas, they were then apprenticed into the Taltos tradition and brought up so that they could remember who they were, and brought up within essentially a separate culture within the Magyar culture that were what we would now call witches. And they were revered. They were asked to help settle disputes of course, fortune telling, healing, many things like that. They worked with, well, it says a sieve, but what it more was a like a tambourine with holes in it that was made out of copper or silver. And sometimes they would be two separate instruments. You would have the sieve, which would be very much like a sieve, a colander, that would be made out of copper or silver, and some would have the bell separate, or it would be attached to, so you could make that sound, and there was often magic involved. But the Taltos, specifically, I believe there was two parts to the Taltos. So the Taltos could not just enter trance, but enter trance with one part of their mind, while being with you, speaking to you at the same time. And that's why the Taltos was said to be having two spirits. But that's we don't need to get into the specifics of that. So even within this Taltos tradition, there was already this idea that there was good Taltos and bad Taltos that you could hire to make your crops grow, or to stop a bad Taltos that was making your crops crumble. And this was something that was practiced well up into the 1300s in some areas. But as the last of the Hungarian or Magyar kings succumbed to Christianity, which was actually one of the very last pagan kings, was a Magyar, the very last barbarians to succumb to Christianity. And they were a Taltos practicing tradition, which means they revered us, the witches, and had a place for them within society. And they were the very last within Europe. There are places where such traditions are still held to some extent, especially within the Native American tradition, but it's become too attached to other things at this point, and we have many people, even in there, that don't remember who they are. So, perhaps witches are a community in crisis. And it is time for us to rise. Yes, it is time to get back. All that being said, like I said, I don't know what word we really want to use for ourselves. I don't feel like we really, as much as the title of this video is Calling All Freaks, Reclaiming the Word Witch, it was never really our word. Yes? If we're reclaiming it, we are reclaiming it as one would any slur, and are only now truly using it for ourselves. We did not call ourselves witches. Witch is a word that was used to burn us, to stone us in other places, or the concept of it was used to harm us, not grow us. But if we want to reclaim this word, I am amused with that. We can call ourselves witches. Call ourselves whatever we like. But it is time that we began behaving as ourselves and began remembering who we are. And that's part of what I'm here to do, yeah? That's part of my goal in all these videos that I've been doing is, well, not only to encourage those that are out there to stand strong and admit who we are, but also to encourage those to remember or to begin that path. Because this is the way towards cohesion for us as a society even, is to where we get to the point that we realize looking to the future is not some abstract concept. What's going to happen in 100 years from now isn't something that doesn't matter to you. You have a very personal interest in what occurs in 100, 200, 300, 500 years from now will matter to you because you're going to be here, whether you remember this one or not. And that's what I'm really after here, yeah? Getting more of us on the page that there's no escaping here. We better start remembering who we are and doing something about it. Because this is where we live. And yes, maybe now that the Cosmic Collective is back, there are ways to escape this reality. So there is escaping here in that sense. But we always have to exist somewhere. And we need to start remembering. Okay, so let's see. What all have I covered here? And how far off from my original plotline have I gotten at this point? We've talked about witches in pop culture. We've talked about the modern concept of witches. We've talked about what witches are. We've talked about not only what witches are, but how they are seen positively and negatively as a false idea and as a real concept. Like I said, there have always been those that have been trying to repress that. Those elements do exist to this day. But some of those more pernicious elements of it do seem to be at bay for this time. Those of you that have an idea what I'm talking about, I have been debating whether we're going to get into that or not. Perhaps in another video. I don't want to talk too much about that. There's not a lot to worry about at this point, but you know. No point in really getting into fears that aren't a concern at this time. But if you are out there, well, come and get me. I'm right here. Taking my mask off. So, anyways, I think that will be it for this episode. Thank you once again for joining us. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please take the opportunity to do so now. Until next time, bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tal.